Black people are the oldest people on the planet. Mm-hmm. What that means in scientific terms is that we've had the longest time for natural selection and evolution to act on our DNA chains. That's why we excel in so many areas. And usually when you see areas where we're lacking, there are environmental factors.
Being in the school system, and we talk about the child being, a lot of times we hear that the parents are to blame for their child not doing well in school. And one thing that I do think about is it kind of reminds me of the conversation I heard yesterday with the elder Baba Kaba, and he was talking about how he was actually talking about Simone Biles. But I remember when my daughter was in gymnastics, and the gymnast teacher, she was saying, well, Black girls tend to be more powerful than their counterparts. So they're more powerful. They when it comes to gymnastics, and we see that in most sports, that Blacks tend to be more powerful. But one thing that he was talking about is how they had to change the game once Simone Biles. So now they penalize her because the other ones can't do the same thing that they do. So it got me to thinking about in education, how our brains are functioning differently. Or the question is, are our brains functioning differently? And if they're functioning differently than our white counterparts, because I know, especially with people on the actual continent of Africa, when they come over here to the United States, they usually excel. And even in other cultures, they tend to excel. And it seems like even especially in Nigeria, they have a lot of people who come there and they're creating like new technology. So, and when they are even explaining, the brother who, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Gagut, but the theorem, not theory, but the actual theorem, that the formula for the God formula, that's what it's called. It's GAGUT. So we can have that's a whole another conversation. But when he breaks it down, and it's very complex, right? Like it's supposed to surpass Albert Einstein's theory. So it's supposed to surpass that. But when he breaks it down in a way that almost anybody can understand. So it just makes me think that our brains are processing information differently, but because we're in their European system and it's not meant for us, then we are looked at as, a lot of our children are looked at as being slow, or not as, not smart, or they're dumb. So do you think it is actual that our brains are processing information differently, we're thinking differently, or is it more of lack of parental guidance and just the system, or just the system the system itself?
We can't absolutely point at either. It's not an either or. It's okay. Definitely a little bit of both and some other things. We have, and I'm not leveling what I'm about to say at you, but people have a tendency to want to oversimplify their analysis of a problem and also the solution. There are inherent differences between our children's physiology and brain than other people's children. If anybody is a student of Dr. Amos Wilson, he talks about how, I don't remember which book, Brother Emo, if you know, you can chime in, but he has a book where he talks about how the speech capabilities of Black children manifest themselves way earlier than any other child on the planet. More often than not, the speech capabilities are far superior in the babies and the youngest kids than any other people. And this speaks to the ancientness of our DNA. Black people are the oldest people on the planet. Mm-hmm. What that means in scientific terms is that we've had the longest time for natural selection and evolution to act on our DNA chains. That's why we excel in so many areas. And usually when you see areas where we're lacking, there are environmental factors like lead. I'm in Chicago. There are 700 or 800,000 water service lines that are made out of lead. And when I heard NPR talking about this 2 years ago, they said the city only had a plan for fixing 800 of them over the next 12 to 18 months. So they're going to tackle almost 1 million lead water service lines, 100 at a time. Here's the issue. Lead water, new brain, destruction. Many children's cognitive abilities have been impaired by simply consuming lead water. So you can start with a magnificent brain, drink a bunch of lead water, and your brain power be degraded. So you got nature, you got nurture, you got environment, you got hereditary factors. There's just so much at play.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot at play, and I think to Sister Mom, one of the things that I thought was very profound, Baba James Small, one of the things that he said is I thought it was pretty powerful. It was pretty powerful. He says we don't recognize ourselves when we look in the mirror, right? So I think the example I would use is Ebonics, like language, the way we speak to each other. I think, you know, I know within my family, if I use the word Ebonics in a room full of people in my family, it becomes a joke. Like they don't think it's actually a language. They think like, oh, Ebonics, yeah, I bet this is Ebonics too, you know, like, and they start cutting up and, you know, all these things. But I think and you know, I understand, you know, that I understand why people don't always understand, right? People haven't, you know, necessarily researched or studied these kinds of things. But I think what happens is when we speak, or the way we speak, or our languages sometimes carry logics, right? They carry I guess value systems that are germane to a culture, to our culture. So the thing is sometimes we think in ways that are germane to our culture, and that's why we arrange the words the way we do, right? And that's what Ebonics is. Mm-hmm. But I think what happens is because we don't recognize ourselves when we look in the mirror, we don't know who we are as African people. Sometimes we exist in exile of ourselves. Sometimes we contradict ourselves and we get into conflicts with each other about who we are and about things that we don't recognize are outgrowths of who we are. You see, so I think a lot of that is at play. So that's at play when we're dealing with each other. But when we go to schools, or when we go in, I mean, it's not only school. When we interface with racists and Europeans or other groups of people who don't understand our culture, I think if we don't know who we are, then, and they say something about us, then we don't know how, you know, sometimes, I mean, if it's negative, we know automatically not true, right? But I think when people say things about us and we don't know who we are, we don't know what we should accept and what we should decline, what we should reject and what we should accept. So I think that's so, and I think that becomes clarified when we talk about what a system is, or who and what is the system. Mm-hmm. To me, I think that's why I answered the question differently than Brother Hannibal when you said, "Are we black?" What would you ask? Are we black? Are we black?
Are we white with black face?
Are we white with black face? See, I answer the question differently because when I think of the system, I don't think the system exists beyond white people. White people are the system. Now you have black people who participate in that system or align themselves with white people, but white people to me are the system. You know, not capitalism, white people, right? Like I don't think you know, I think white people are the system. So if we're not white people, if we're who we are, then that means what culture system, what matrix or what system are we operating within? But we don't always appreciate or recognize our own cultural matrix, our own culture. We don't appreciate who we are. We don't appreciate our own systems, right? We don't know what our own systems are sometimes. We don't recognize whether we're a part of them or not because we don't know exactly what they are. So I think what we need to do is get clarity on who we are. And I think, you know, part of the political process of us getting free is completely understanding who the system is or who they are. Because for me, as a history major, when I was learning all this history, I didn't learn a whole lot about African history. So I became very familiar and adept at identifying what European ideas are and who Europeans are, but I didn't know who African people were. So, I mean, we're not the opposites of them. We're something completely independent of them. So we need to study our own history and culture to understand who we are without thinking of ourselves strictly in relationship to Europeans or other people.